Welcome everyone to this afternoon's session. What LEED reviewers are looking for, best practices from GBCI. I'm Sarah Alexander. I head up the certification and credentialing teams at GBCI, and I've been with the organization for, I think it's about 9.5 years now. I have a background originally in geology and geophysics, but then went back to school to do a degree in architecture when I moved to DC. Oops, I'm coming in and out. And I worked in a low-income housing practice for about 18 months before joining USGBC in 2008. And I'm joined today by Ken Simpson, director of our certification team, and he will introduce himself.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Ken Simpson, director of certification for energy and HVAC team. Been with GBCI since October of 2010, so just a little over 7 years. And my background is in mechanical design consulting.
So we've got some learning objectives today. We've got 4 learning objectives, but I want to get you forewarned and forearmed. We want to actually open it up for a discussion after we've gone through these learning objectives of why certify. So have that in the back of your mind. Have that so we want to get some audience participation once we've gone through the learning objectives. So the first one today is understand who your LEED reviewers are. We're going to introduce you to some of them and their role in keeping the review process consistent. Know how to engage the review team to your project's advantage globally and make successful project submissions. Get to know the Proven Provider program. Actually, how many of you know about Proven Provider? And okay, we have a lot of knowledge in the room. We'll go through that one quite quickly. And then learn the main differences between 2009 and V4 project submissions. So some of you may realize and have heard over the last few days, we've actually got a few more that have come into the GBCI family this week. But this slide represents what we had in our family before Greenbuild. And you'll see that LEED is no longer our only rating system. We are a service provider and provide well certification services to the International Well Building Institute. PIER is our rating system related to microgrids and resilient power grids. GRES, how many of you participate in the GRES real estate survey assessment each year? So a few people with knowledge on that in the room. Sustainable sites. EDGE is a building rating system that's for developing countries. So we are a service provider for a global partner for the International Finance Corporation, which is the for-profit arm of the World Bank. And they created the EDGE program about 3 years ago. And we provide certification services to about 130 countries around the world. It's not available in the US. We're not considered to be a developing country. And we are also the sole service provider in India. ParkSmart is fairly self-explanatory. It's a rating system for parking garages, enhancing sustainability there. And this has been a really interesting one to see, because we're finding that there are really innovative technologies that they're putting forward in parking garages, but also they're starting to rethink these and making them actually a nexus and a center of the community. So some of these are becoming multi-use spaces. There are underground parking garages that may have parks on the top. So it's been really exciting to see some of the projects coming through ParkSmart. True was formerly known as Zero Waste. So this is really looking at the circular economy and diversion of waste and minimizing of hazardous materials. We've had quite a lot of uptake in True, both within the US and now also certifying projects internationally as well. And last but not least, a very important one, the Investor Confidence Project. And they have an investor-ready energy efficiency certification that came into GBCI earlier this year. And this is where they've developed some standard protocols for energy retrofit projects that you follow. And we do the assessment, the technical assessment to an underwriting, essentially, for investment funds to be able to invest in those green retrofit projects. So it's a step in the right direction to start to tie the money that's out there to invest in green retrofits with making sure we've got a standard protocol so that those projects are properly underwritten. So just to give you a quick sense of what our delivery network is looking like now, we have a network probably of around approximately 750 individuals who are delivering certification services around the globe. This is not just staff. but this is also our contracted reviewers, our homes providers, our green raters, our well assessors, our true assessors. These are all spread out across the globe. You may have heard that GBCI has an office in India, and we have a fully staffed certification team there, headed by our colleague Deepak, and you'll learn a little bit more about Deepak from Ken later in the presentation. And obviously this is giving you an indication of where we have those strategic partnerships, or we have regional hubs around the world. +10,000 phases of review so far this year. This was actually at the end of October. So we're still very busy with LEED. And what I think is really encouraging is the number of V4 projects that are being submitted now is growing really quite rapidly. So that's been very, very encouraging. You're not expected to be able to read this one. This is just giving you a little bit of a sense of the activity that we're seeing in some of our newer rating systems. So the dark blue is well, so you're seeing that we've seen some spikes in activity, and if we had October on this chart as well, you'd have seen that October was a very busy month for us in well. The grey is integrating the Park Smart and the True that have been very active, and Edge has become very active in Latin America, which has been very encouraging. And Edge is another program where we do an on-site assessment. So many of you know our major statistics in LEED, but just wanted to call out the 2016 top 5 countries outside of the US: China, Canada, India, Brazil, and the Republic of Korea. We're seeing a lot of interest in East Asia for LEED and for our other programs as well. Well is also taking off in the East Asia Pacific region. So stats that some of you are familiar with, they go up a little bit each year. So 2.2 million square feet are certified every day. We are getting very close to 40,000 certified projects, and this is commercial, so I've got a slide for our residential program coming up. And it's over 6 billion square feet of commercially certified spaces. In our residential program, we've also seen a really good activity here, and with V42 registrations are continuing to go up. We've got over 138,000 certified residential units, and that's more than 183 million square feet that's been certified to our residential programs. I see we have some people standing at the back. There are some seats here in the front and in the middle if you do want to step forward and rest your feet. I know that Greenville can be quite challenging on the feet, so please do come forward. We do have seats at the front. So V4's been out since 2014, but required since October last year, 1st of November. We did have a very large registration spike in September, October last year for V2009, similar to what we experienced when the version 2 rating systems were retired as well, when registration was closed there. We've got over 3,000 V4 registrations, and as I said, we're really starting to see an uptick in those being submitted. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of from registration to submittal, we've got some sort of average numbers. So O&M projects and CI projects tend to come through a little bit faster. Around 18 months is the average time between registration and submitting for review. But for BD&C projects, it's a little bit longer, so it's somewhere between 3 to 5 years. Institutional projects can take longer, but in that 3 to 5 year mark. So we tend to see sort of the crossover of when the newer rating system becomes the predominant one for us in terms of what's coming to GBCI for review, is usually around 3 years after registration closes for the previous rating system. So I'm going to hand over to Ken now. We consider ourselves to be a center of green building expertise, and Ken is going to tell you a little bit about our staff and how they contribute to that.
Perfect. How many of you guys have talked to one of our reviewers on the phone? Good. So we just want to tell you just a little bit about them to let them know they're just like your team. So our team has over 800 years of professional experience combined. We're architects, we're engineers, interior designers, landscape architects, you name it. We have members on technical committees. We have members who are members of societies. We're guest speakers. We have teachers on the team, authors on the team, just like your teams. first member, we want to highlight a couple of things, just about a few members, so just a few. This is Jessica. She was recently named vice chair of the ASHRAE 189 committee. She joined us in 2015, lives in Portland, Oregon, and a fun fact about Jessica, she recently ran to hell and back, Ireland's toughest mental and physical challenge, which is like the Tough Mudder, if you've ever heard of that, in the United States. Richard Kimball was the former president of the Central New York chapter of ASHRAE, and he's a really passionate guy, and if you have time after this, you can come over to the GBCI Workzone on the expo floor and meet Richard. And he's so passionate, he designed and installed on his own a ground source heat pump system at his house in New York, and the PV array is under construction as we speak. This is Kate. Kate is a fellow Austinite with me, and Kate manages our well team, which is one of the rating systems Sarah mentioned. So she manages that team, and Kate actually attended the first green build in Austin, which inspired her to join the sustainability movement. And I can't believe that Kate did not mention this as her fun fact, but Kate is an avid canoeer and recently canoed the Texas River Safari, it's called, from Austin to the Gulf of Mexico, nonstop. I'm impressed. This is Jonathan. Jonathan and I joined the same day in 2010, joined GBCI on the same day. Jonathan lives in Houston. He has been instrumental in implementing and developing our new peer certification. We've both worked really closely together on that over the past few years. And Jonathan once participated in a Habitat for Humanity Global Village project in Botswana. And last but certainly not least, Sarah mentioned Deepak. He manages our certification team in India. Deepak is an expert edge auditor, well assessor, and is super passionate about repurposing materials. He built all of the furniture in his house out of reclaimed wood pallets. So we have an interesting, a good group. So back over to Sarah for a little bit more about GBCI.
Okay, so that's a little bit about some of the people that we have on our team. And you can see that they are walking the talk. They really believe in what we're doing and the mission driven, and they're living their lives that way. So one of the challenges that we have as reviewers is trying to remain as consistent as possible. And I know that all of you feel that sometimes. So it's a really hard and challenging job to do. So we have all this information coming to us. You submit your project to us. All we know about your project is what is in LEED Online. That's all we have. We have no other knowledge. We might go to Google Earth, we might go to Google Street View and just sort of start looking at it and saying, oh, that one's interesting, or just seeing what it looks like from the outside, but that's all we have. And I'll bet if you put two engineers in a room together and they look at the same documentation, I think the end point would be the same, but they might have different questions along the way, depending on their own interests and certain biases. And we try to train and mentor and eliminate that as much as possible, but it is challenging because every project that comes through is absolutely unique. So the first thing we did when we created our team, and some of you might have heard this before, but we started this in 2010, and that's when Ken and others joined the team, was to make sure that we hired industry professionals with extensive experience. So that's part of our mantra. Generally speaking, we're not hiring anyone that doesn't have at least 5 years of industry experience, and many of them have 8, 10 plus. Training and mentoring. So this was a key element that we instituted when we started to create our own review team and also with our contracted reviewers. This is time intensive, but an incredibly important part of the process. So we've established some formal training programs, particularly for our engineers that are going to be doing energy modeling. We put them through the ringer. It's a 3-day training, very intensive. And then we work with them one-on-one. And that one-on-one process can go on for an extensive period of time. So when we're talking about the non-HVAC credits, generally speaking, if you've got someone who's got 5, 6, 7 years of industry experience, we're talking about 6 months to really train them to be a lead reviewer where they're starting to work more independently. On the HVAC side, we're talking for an exceptional person who has a lot of experience, maybe 9 months, but generally speaking, 12 months to 18 months. So it's a huge investment of time on our part to train people to do this work. Whether it's our own staff or whether it's with our contractors, the same process is in place. What we also instituted was some rigorous quality protocols. So we are doing an active assessment of everybody's work. We randomly select projects for a deep dive, and we're almost doing a double review. And we assess the performance of the individual who did the primary review. So this is something that we instituted, I guess it is about 8 years ago now, and we report out both with our staff and with our contractors. They get quarterly reports on how they're doing. We actually send them their scores on a monthly basis, but we do a formal report every quarter. One of the most important aspects of what we do, I sometimes talk about LEED as being 256 shades of gray. It really is so unique on every project in terms of how you're going to approach your credits and the prerequisites. So one of the key elements that we need is a regular system of proactive feedback and making sure that we are updating our reviewer community as things come up. So we have regular monthly calls, which is for our staff and our contractors, so we all get together, we try and work as a cohesive unit, and that's when we're sharing things that we might have come across. We come across a particularly tricky aspect. How should we rule on this? It's not always very clear-cut. And so that comes back to our team, we'll talk about it, we might even reach out to our colleagues in the LEED department, say, what was the intent behind, the way this credit was written, what are your thoughts, before we come to a conclusion on that. What I do want to emphasize, there is no secret sauce with being a reviewer. We're working from exactly the same published materials as everyone else as a project team, and whether or not we're discussing things internally, none of that will go into a ruling unless it's published. So we actually sometimes generate administrative credit interpretation and LEED interpretation rulings because we're seeing something come in from a lot of projects and we think, you know what, the published material could be a little bit clearer on this. And then we'll work with our colleagues in the LEED department, with technical advisory committees, and then we work to get that published so everybody has access to that interpretation. The other aspect of the feedback process, which we've found particularly rewarding over the last 5 or 6 years, is we make ourselves available to project teams to have conference calls, video conference calls, meet you in person, to talk about your projects. We would much prefer to talk to you before you submit for review, before you've done all that work, you've got any questions, you've got a particularly tricky aspect. And that's a really important feedback loop. So you may be asking us questions, but we will probably ask you questions too, and that's a really important part of the feedback loop that we have found particularly rewarding so that we're getting that information directly from the market. And then the last element of our continuous cycle of improvement is making sure that we update our internal processes and guidance. One thing that I do want to say is that one of the challenges we have is we know everybody wants the results of their reviews really, really quickly. We're working on it. So for our new programs, the non-LEED commercial programs, and for our LEED for Homes program, we have instituted a 10 business day turnaround time. But for commercial, we're not quite there yet. We're looking to see if we can't start to move and shorten those timelines from 20 business days in 2018. But if you think about that BD&C project that you're submitting, and BD&C is the meatiest of them all, it's not that it takes us 4 weeks to review everything, but it goes through a process of being assigned. The primary reviewer does their draft, and then we do our quality control on it. And if it's a particularly tricky one, you might need to reach out to other experts. So if we think about some of the people that Ken introduced you to, Jonathan Curtin, for example, is one of our energy experts when it comes to stadium and hospitals, so healthcare facilities. So if you've got a project that's come through, you're an energy reviewer, and you've got a particularly tricky issue, you're going to want to reach out to Jonathan because he has more expertise in it and ask him questions. So those timelines need to account for and accommodate that sort of back and forth internally to make sure that we can actually get to the right answer and rule appropriately for project teams.
So what does all of that mean for you guys? It means we are here to help. If you take nothing away from my part of the presentation today, it's this. If you have a problem, ask us. ask as early as possible. If you get to hit the submit button and then you think to ask questions, it can just be too late in many situations. So nothing else. Ask early, ask often. So when you call, we can talk about any subject. No question is off the table. Minimum program requirements, project scope, energy modeling, ventilation, innovative strategies. We can almost always make it work. Some of the trickier topics can take a little longer, but if we work together like a project team, we can usually find a way forward. We're available. Call us. We'll talk to any team, anytime. Maybe not any time of the day, but anytime. There's a little bit of feedback. Sorry. I can't see it.
Excuse us.
Sorry. Perfect. Okay. There's a few avenues to reach out. As you know, many of you have visited the Workzone. We have Workzones around the globe now. We recently had one at the ASHRAE Summer Conference, and we had one at Greenbuild, India, just last week. Use the Contact Us form, or again, call us. You can call anytime. You can call before, or you can schedule a call before you submit. You can schedule a call after you get your review comments. All we ask is, let us know what your question is. Give us an agenda so we can get the right person on the phone. How much customer service do we do? This is just a couple of numbers for you guys. That is over 110 cases per day of customer service that we handle among our team. So transitioning a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about resources, a little bit about how you can help you to make things go a little bit more smoothly. So the first step among all project teams and us is do a rigorous quality check on your side. The first tip would be to put one person in charge of the submittal. And I know many of you do this. Most successful teams actually do this. Put one person in charge of all cross-checks across the credits and one person in charge of uploading all the forms for the whole team. The second thing would be make sure the square footage, the FTE, the operating hours, the lead project boundary are consistent across all credits. I can't tell you how many review comments are just very simple to get those back to the project team to get those numbers in sync. And a quick check nullifies a lot of review comments. Narratives. You guys understand your projects well. Sometimes a design project can take several years, so you know it like the back of your hand. Your reviewer has a limited time not only to understand it, review it, and give you comments back that you can understand. That is not easy, as Sarah said. It takes a while to train someone to do that well. So provide narratives. If you think it's a tricky situation, especially, just give us a quick narrative and that'll make things a lot easier. Highlight the relevant information. Don't provide more than we ask. If it's a 100-page report, but the only pages that matter are the first 3, give us those, or highlight in your PDF what we need to know. That makes things a lot simpler. We don't go looking for conflicts in the, sorry. Still there? I'm very, I can talk without it, so it's fine. It's okay? Sure. Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, so highlight the relevant information. Give us only what we ask for, and point it out to the reviewers. Again, help them, help you. Last point is use intuitive labels for your documents. I know that may seem silly, but often we get a lot of documents where Adobe has named the file, and it takes 20, 30 minutes just to figure out what your teams have provided, when we could spend more time helping you guys get through the review process. So a few of the resources, of course, the online credit library is great. That's what I use, actually, to do many of the reviews. So I encourage you to use that. The LEED reference guides, by far the most popular resource, and the V4 reference guides contain many updates. They're built to be a lot more holistic, and the rating system is built, the reference guide is built to show that it's a holistic process as opposed to a list of credits within the reference guide. A couple of the new sections are the Getting Started sections. That goes beyond the introduction and provides a work plan framework for the team. The navigation tools, if information is only useful if you can find it. So if a credit is connected to another credit, we've told you that. If a credit is connected to the Getting Started section or the team setup section, we've let you know that as well. Step by step, that is exact, oh, sorry, I need to go forward. The step-by-step section is exactly what it sounds like. For most credits, all teams can follow the same steps. So it provides a step-by-step with examples and tips throughout. Related credit tips, further explanation is about tricky applications, compliance paths, tricky non-standard project types. Behind the intent connects the credit to the larger sustainability issue and provides just a little more context of why the credit even exists. Changes from the previous versions, pretty obvious. We're telling you the difference between version 3 and version 4. And the very last section is the reference standards section. So we provide a list of the reference standards and give you a link to each one. The V4 submittal tips, we had this for V3, V2009. We've done this again for V4. If you haven't seen it, please check it out. We think it's really valuable. It's in the credit resources section next to each credit. And don't forget, we have loads of education from our education partners and our education team within USGBC. And depending on your level of membership, you could have access to 100% of it already. A couple of things about Proven Provider really fast, and I'll pass it back over to Sarah. Proven Provider, there we go. This gives you greater access to project teams. So far, there are 118 Proven Provider teams as of October 24th, 2017. We have 2,500 certified Proven Provider projects. A couple of steps that we encourage Proven Provider teams to take that leads to success in those projects are meet internally, meet often among the team. So many teams are just collecting documentation from each individual member, and they don't talk about their projects. So we definitely encourage that. Share lessons learned across the team. If you get comments back, share them with the team, right? Learn and get better project over project. Update your QC methodologies. Many teams don't have an internal QC process, and we definitely encourage it to improve. Last but not least, of course, stay current with the LEED guidance and the quarterly addenda. And I'll pass it back to Sarah for a little bit about V4.
So that's one thing. You can see that with this latest series of slides that came through, it's really mirroring our own cycle of continuous improvement. And that dialogue that you have with your colleagues, what did you experience on a review? What were the questions that were asked? Can we do something differently so we don't get that one again? That's a really important part of your own processes before you come to us. And I used to use the example when my kids were at high school of, doing your homework and setting out your working so that your teacher can very quickly look at it and say, yep, move along to the next one. That's a happy teacher if they don't have to spend a lot of time sort of digging through what your working might have been to try and figure out, did you understand it? Did you get it right? Did you not understand it? So it's a sort of a similar process that we're looking for within LEED submissions too. And as we all say, no two projects, are the same. They just aren't. As reviewers, what we find is, you might get we assign reviews randomly. So just to give you a little bit of a backstory in terms of how our reviewers get assigned work. So we try and automate as much as possible. So if you've got a project that's in a campus, that means when you submit for review, LEED Online is sending us an electronic signal. When you've paid, by the way, we don't get the signal until you've paid. So just to let you know that you might think that we're starting the review, but we don't, and we don't get the signal until you've paid. But what it does, it attaches an extra signal so that we know that this is part of a group of projects. And we can assign a consistent review team to that group of projects. So that's a really important element. We want to be able to build up some institutional knowledge when we have a campus coming through, whether it's a university campus, a commercial campus, whatever it might be, and there are multiple buildings coming through, either individually or in groups. That's a really important aspect, that we get that electronic signal, and it just helps us, because once somebody becomes familiar with your projects and what you're doing on the campus, that just makes the process go faster and more smoothly. So that's an important aspect of what we do. So in terms of randomly assigning, it's not totally random. The thing that we look at is the rating system. So not all reviewers do all rating systems. So we tend to have a split between those that are experts in O&M and those that are experts on the design and construction side, and then another group for those that are working with neighborhood development. We do find that we've got a crossover between our commercial BD&C, and we have some staff that are also very knowledgeable about homes. But homes is another one where, generally speaking, we've hired people from the industry who are working in the homes program. There's an extra level of expertise and knowledge needed there, because it's a different delivery model. You've got that on-site assessment of the green rater coming and verifying your project on site. Give you a little bit of background there. So we're randomly assigning by project ID number. We're not necessarily looking at the project title. We're not going to know if your project's connected. So as a reviewer, 1 week you might get assigned a data center. The next week you might get that hospital we were talking about earlier. The following week you might get what we all love, which is a commercial office building, because they're, generally speaking, the simplest sorts of projects that we see. The next week you might get a manufacturing facility or a school. So you can see the sort of diversity of usage types that our reviewers are experiencing, and it is a tall order to expect them to be able to have that expertise in all of those different sectors. We do our very best. We don't always get it 100% right. You let us know, and then we'll make corrective action. So it is very much that feedback loop. So V4, how many of you are doing V4? Everyone, see? Everyone's doing V4 now. So V4, it raises the bar and pushes that trillion-dollar green building industry forward. We are seeing that now that it's become the required rating system, people are a little bit less anxious about it, always when something's sort of out in the future and you're not quite sure. But now that it's become required, people are seeing that it is still actually very achievable. We do understand that with some of the material credits on the design and construction side, depending on where you're located, those might be a little bit more challenging, but what we've seen in the last 2 years, because we didn't make LEED V4 required, we had that 2-year transition period, is so many more products are coming on the market and actually giving you the information that we're requiring for. Do you remember way back when trying to get information on the recycled content? And then it moved the market forward. We're seeing the same thing happening here, which is really rewarding to see. And some of you may be familiar with this, our V4 System Goals. These are, obviously, we looked at the UN Sustainability Goals, and these are one of our driving forces, and these are the sustainability and system goals that V4 was looking for. So climate change is obviously a key one. The second most important one, and if you look at the points distribution, you'll see this, is human health. That's also something that's been key to LEED right from the beginning. That IEQ section is all about human health inside the building, and particularly those EQ Credit 4. I know I can't call them EQ Credit 4 anymore. Sorry, I'm still in EQ Credit 4. Looking at, VOCs and other aspects of the materials in the building. Water, one of our most precious resources. We can't live without it. We wouldn't exist. So that's one that is really key, making sure that we are conserving potable water sources. Biodiversity in the ecosystem. I talked about this a little bit a couple of days ago. Maybe it was only yesterday, actually. Time goes differently when you're at Greenbuild. It is so important. We've got this living lab. The Earth's been around for 3.8 billion years and perfecting the complex ecosystems that are out there. And she's figured out how to do some stuff. We shouldn't build on wetlands. They're called wetlands for a reason. We shouldn't build on a floodplain. There's a clue in the title. It's called a floodplain. It will flood. My own stepmother and my father, they've actually got a lovely house, but it's built on a water meadow. And guess what? Sometimes it floods because it's called a water meadow. It's a lovely location, but they've had to plan accordingly because that's what's going to happen with the local streams. Sustainable and regenerative material cycle. So that's obviously sustainable materials and rapidly renewable materials have been part of LEED right from the beginning, but it is now even more of a focus within the V4 rating systems. The green economy. This is really something that is keeping all of us here in this room employed and many millions of other people out there. It makes economic sense. And that's one of the most exciting aspects of the green building movement and that LEED has been part of the last 17 years. And then quality of life in the community. That's another extremely important aspect. We want to make sure that we're all connected. It's very easy in this digital age that, you might be standing next to somebody, but you're still texting, to have a conversation, to get out in the community and actually talk to people. I did a presentation recently in DC on LEED for cities and the sort of data that cities are collecting at the moment. And it's a huge amount of data. And it's a tool. It's not a substitute for people going out into the community and actually talking to people about what their needs are. But the data that's collected and that you can do analytics on is an excellent tool to help you answer those questions. But it is no substitute for having a conversation. And really, when you're doing certification, it is a communication process. It is a conversation process. You're telling us about what you're doing, and we're saying, yep, that checks the boxes, or got a question on this, or no, unfortunately, that one doesn't quite miss the mark. So the impact categories are another aspect of V4, not just the system goals. And this is where you can see, as you see the distribution, the weightings of points in V4, that human health is the second most important category in the V4 rating system. Many of you are familiar with what we're doing with V4. We've got regional priority credits. We're doing some adaptations or alternative compliance paths for different parts of the world. That's an incredibly important aspect of being able to implement LEED where you are. And market selection adaptations. I think I've lost count of the number of rating systems we have at the moment, whether it's for data centers or warehouses, but all of them are incredibly important, that we have a system that is adaptable and flexible for the use type of your particular project. One of the points that we wanted to talk about a little bit here is the user experience, and we'll actually like some feedback on that. There was a huge effort in the development of V4 and in the forms for V4 to try and cut back on what you might call LEED-specific documentation that wasn't going to be sort of standard information or standard documentation for a design and construction project or in your operations and maintenance. We went a long way. We'd put a lot of effort into that. Our team was involved with the LEED department to try and cut down on the sort of information that you were having to customly create. We've had very good feedback, but we're always interested in more, and now that more people are using it, if you have feedback where you think we can improve it further, please do send that to us. We're not very good at telepathy. Sometimes we're good at intuiting things, but just tell us. We really do read everything. Sometimes you don't get your response as fast as you would like it, but honestly, we're reading everything, we're taking everything in, and then we're applying it. So one of the things I think you've heard talked about at Green Bill for the last year or so is really thinking about not just the initial certification, whether you're a new construction building, a new neighborhood, or an interiors project, or whether you're an existing building that's doing a major retrofit or you're just doing a small retrofit, that you're not once and done. That really what's important is that ongoing monitoring of your performance. The rating system requires that you report energy and water data for 5 years after you're certified. We didn't make that very easy for you to do before the advent of the ART platform, but now every project that's registered, every LEED project that's registered has free access to the ART platform for 5 years. You just need to click on a link. You'll probably find it in your post-certification page in LEED Online, and move straight there and start tracking and reporting your data. It really is that simple. If you're reporting in Portfolio Manager, you can import it directly into the ARC platform, and there are more and more apps that are being added to the ARC platform to make that data transfer even easier. So most of you in this room are very familiar with the bullets that are on this slide. The one that has been part of LEED right from the beginning is the integrative process. We didn't have a credit for it before. Now it is formally in the rating system. And I think that was a very important step. It was implied, required in order to do a successful LEED project, but now we are actually recognizing it within the rating system. The others you're all very familiar with. Location and transportation was split out in V4, used to be all incorporated in sustainable sites, so that was just a slight structural change. Energy, water, materials and resources, human health, the indoor environment, no change there. So the certification process for V4 project is no different from the certification process for prior versions of the rating system. It is different if you're using the ARC platform, if you're using the O&M ACP, then it is slightly different in that platform. And that is really our vision for the future, that all of it will move to the ARC platform and we'll have that more dynamic, interactive ability to do your reviews in a slightly different way. It's a vision that's going to sort of materialize over the next year or so. There's a lot of work that goes into hard coding for that. But it's our vision to have all of our rating systems integrated in the ARC platform. We're starting off with some of our newer rating systems. So, for example, ParkSmart sites will soon be in there, and the True rating system. Our vision is that you will register, may not be for LEED, you might just be registering for sustainable sites, and you'll be doing your credits in sustainable sites. We know there are some equivalencies that are being published, and these are happening for the other rating systems as well. You're in ARC, don't have to do anything else. You'll see that there are tabs for the other rating systems. You move to that tab, you've earned Sites Gold, move to the LEED tab, shows all your sustainable sites credits and points have been awarded. So that it's happening seamlessly in the background. It's going to take us a while to get there. So just have a little bit of patience. Ultimately, all the commercial rating systems will be in there too, but we're starting off with O&M and with our newer programs and starting to develop this sort of code so that it can be much more of a seamless user experience. The other aspect that we find really exciting is we want to be able to leverage sort of smart suggestions. So depending on your project's location and you start to build your scorecard, it might suggest, hey, 75% of other projects in this area have actually attempted these credits too. Do you want to take a look at them? So starting to share that information so that you're really seeing in a live, dynamic way, getting suggestions of what you could do and credits that you could achieve. So now we want to get to the bit where you guys get to talk. We want to ask you, this is the big question, right? Why certify? Everyone says, well, I can just build to green. It's the same thing. We obviously don't believe it is. And I want to give you a little bit of an anecdote. So I'm a mother with 2 children at university. So I'm paying out-of-state tuition fees for my daughter, who's a senior, and my son, who's a sophomore. So have some sympathy. It's a big, tall order. And we had a contract with our kids before they went to university. We are doing our very best to pay 100% of their costs for their undergraduate degree. It was something we committed to a long time ago. But as part of that contract, they have to maintain a certain grade point average, right? This is not a free ride where you can sort of just fail your courses. Now, as a consumer, I think of myself as a consumer with my kids at university. If they just attended class and never did any assessments or never had anybody evaluate whether or not they had absorbed that information and understood it, I don't think I would have got value for money. How would I know whether my son had actually ditched that particular morning's class? It was actually crucially important, so he missed a critical piece of information if there wasn't subsequently an independent assessment to say, did you actually learn this and are you able to apply it? So that's a completely outside of certification example, but it's something that struck me as my kids have gone through their growing up process and the different stages that we're in. I would feel I would not be very happy about paying for courses if I didn't know that they were actually learning something with the thousands and thousands of dollars that we pay to support them each year. So we wanted to turn this over to you. We've had some, great dialogue on LEED user recently. It's been so invigorating for us to read it. We're seeing people post as to why certify and not just build green. And some of the people we see posting, we think, yeah, they're not always happy with the review comments that we give them because we hear from them on the other side. But there's a resounding endorsement of why you should actually go through the certification process. So feel free, either come to the mic. Selena also has a mic that she can hand around. But why do you choose to certify your projects? Keep employed? I mean, that's one thing, right? You've all got jobs, so that's an important aspect. So some ideas just to sort of get that conversation going. There have been some studies done over the last few years. So if you're looking at commercial real estate, they're seeing that there are higher rental rates, there's higher sales prices, projects are moving along more quickly, so you have less idle rates, there's shorter periods of time, you're selling them quickly. You're eligible for utility incentives, sometimes tax incentives as well, which you wouldn't be eligible for if you weren't certified. Some of you over on this side of the room raised your hands for GRESB and ESG reporting each year, and GRESB awards points if you are actually certified, so that's another important aspect. And we'll turn it over to the microphone in the middle of the room.
Thanks. I'm Pia Erling, I'm coming from Sweden, but I don't choose to certify as my clients, and probably the same for most people in the room. But my clients, they certify because some of them have high sustainability goals, but also they get lower interest on their loans if they certify to a certain level.
We're seeing that access to green financing products is really starting to be a driver in the marketplace. That is really making a difference. And that's what we really want to also do with the rating systems we're doing with ICP, with GRESB and others, is starting to connect those two to make sure that people have easy access to it. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thanks.
Hi, I truly believe in certification to the point that I view it as a guideline and a pathway to sustainable buildings. And because of that, I'm certifying my own house. And for clients, they have different motivations, but it's, yeah.
Thanks, Agnes. So how many of you, when you have those conversations with your clients, are you talking to them about, well, this is actually an independent check on what you are asking for and you are paying for? That's another important aspect, right? This is really as much as anything else for the owner. It's a bit like me as the consumer with my son's and my daughter's education. This is an independent check to make sure that I'm getting what I'm paying for, the value for money. How many of you, we all experience it, value engineering during the process, right? From design through to construction. It's a very important process, but if you haven't got an independent check, you might value engineer out really important elements of the building that can lead to greater durability, lower operating costs. So that's another factor where having this independent check really becomes a valuable aspect of the project's life cycle. Do you have any other thoughts from the audience? It's good to share these ideas. There's one right here. I can't hear you. You might have to stand up and speak a little louder. Is it switched on? You have to press it for about 30 seconds. Okay. Thank you so much for going to the microphone.
That's fine, this works. So I work for an engineering firm in New York City, and a lot of the local laws actually require LEED certification, LEED Silver. A lot of the federal government buildings that we've been working on also require LEED Silver and 30% reduction in energy consumption for your building. So we're starting to see a lot more interaction between LEED and federal, state, city level governments requiring those in their buildings. So that's one thing. The other thing is that for well, since we're an engineering firm, our clients are mostly architects, and so a lot of architects know and understand the value of LEED, the value that LEED can have, especially towards I guess, migrating towards a more progressive and modern, not only engineering and architecture firm, but for our clients in New York City as well, and around the world too.
Thanks for sharing that. So there are a lot of reasons that go behind it, and it's something that we think about. What is that value proposition in terms of what our business is, right? We've got to stay competitive as the certification body, so it's something that we're thinking about all the time. So what we wanted to leave you with is just a snippet of where we're going, and what we want everyone to start thinking about is that commitment to share data. LEED has always been about transparency. And with the technology and the analytics that we have in the ARC platform, it's now accessible to every single LEED project. You can start putting in your data. It's transparent in terms of you can report it out to your clients, to your tenants. If you're a city, you're going to be reporting it out to your citizens. And what it is it's in BD&C, we have a predicted, what we think we're going to use in energy. What's happening now is, well, how much did you actually use? And we've got over 2,000 projects that are already using the ARC platform. They're putting in their data. And it's been really illuminating for them to see, well, how am I actually doing? This is what I was predicted to do, how much energy I'm actually using. And we've got the portfolio element of it that's just been released. So if you're a school district, for example, you might have all your schools in there. And we had an example in a previous presentation this week where it was a school district and they had all their schools listed and they were looking at water consumption. And right at the bottom were 2 high schools that were using 3 times as much water as the other schools. So that doesn't give you an answer, but it allows you to start asking questions. And it could be a very valid reason, right? In high school, you tend to have sports activities, you've got showers. There are very good reasons why you might be using more water. But what it did was allow that school district to quickly look at the performance across their entire portfolio of schools and ask that question and start investigating and seeing whether there was something they could borrow from another school that was performing really well and maybe apply that to a school that wasn't doing quite so well. What you'll see in the ARC platform is a performance scorecard. It looks very similar in terms of the structure to what you're used to in LEED Online. We've got energy, we've got water, we've got transportation, and we've got human experience. So that all looks very familiar, and you've got a score out of 100. If you've already got an initial certification, either with O&M, operations and maintenance, or with BD&C and ID&C, you've got these 10 base points that you can carry across from your initial certification. So that gets you started on your score. So this is our final thought: performance matters. Data, performance, and transparency. What we've done, you might have noticed, is in the LEED project directory, again, very transparent. We have all of our certified projects published in the public directory, is we recently made an update, and there are now icons that will be colored in if a project is complying and actually reporting their energy and water data. So that's something that is now transparent for everybody to see in the project directory as to whether or not a certified project is current and is actually reporting that data. We'll be doing a lot of communication over this over the next 6 to 8 months. We want to encourage as many projects as possible to come in and actually report their data. That sort of information we can crowdsource. It can then provide strategies and ideas for other projects in the area. You can see when you're in your own project, you can see how you're doing now, how you did a month ago, how you did a year ago. You can see how you compare with other projects in your locality, in your region, or globally. The data analytics that have just gone live in the system, you can look at energy and water consumption. You can look at it on a per square foot basis. You can look at it on a per occupant basis. You can look at, for energy, your carbon number. So all of this is now being built out into the ARC platform. It's something that we're very excited about because it's really using the data that you've been giving us all these years and actually now doing something with it and talking about it in a different way. So we really hope that you'll be going into the ARC platform, as I said, free for every registered project and certified project as soon as possible and start reporting out on your performance. Ken and I are here to answer questions. We've got our business cards at the front if we don't have time to take enough questions today. Do email us, feel free, and we would love to hear from you. So thanks very much. Thanks.